Yes, we're ready. Okay. Sorry. I don't have the ting, 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 ting.
Yeah.
Ready? Good morning, everyone. Bonjour. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here today. Thank you to Capital Club for hosting this very special session about agriculture, specifically following up the COP16 in Riyadh, in Saudi, Our Land, Our Future. I would like to ask everyone, if you have questions, also the people who follow us at the moment on LinkedIn, to either on the chat on LinkedIn to put your questions, or the people in the room to please share them as well on the LinkedIn link, or to maybe send them to Mona here on WhatsApp, and we will definitely answer them at the end of the first questions. So my name is Tatiana Antonelli. I'm the founder and managing director at Goumbook. Goumbook is a social enterprise. We've been working since 2009 to accelerate sustainability and climate action in the UAE and beyond. In the recent years, we've been really working hard to mobilize private sector, public sector, academia to work together under what we call initiatives. Three of these initiatives are dedicated: one to indoor quality, another one is dedicated to ocean health, and the third one is the MENAT Regenerative Agriculture Program, supported by HSBC and SAB, our World Bank in Saudi, with partners such as EIT Food, of course. And also, since this year, we are endorsed also by the UN High-Level Climate Champions. What we've realized is that there's a huge need to bring together the different sectors for collaboration. And this event today is definitely also an example on how we can come together and discuss agriculture also from a funding and financial point of view, which is key. What we do is focus on research. Well, I'll let Samantha explain more about it. I'll not introduce our speakers. I would love for them to introduce themselves, but thank you very much for being here today. By the way, Sheikh Dr. Majid and Yazen are both on our board, and so I would like to thank them officially for their support to launch the MENAT Regenerative Agriculture Program. But please, Sheikh Dr. Majid, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Well, myself, I'm a trained veterinarian, but I run a specialist advisory. We do food security and water security, as well as net zero and sustainability in the Middle East and North Africa. We typically advise investors, large multinationals, and local groups on what they should be doing either in their net zero journey or how they can interface with the food system effectively. We've been doing this now for 5 years, and very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Samantha Kairouz. I work with Tatiana and members here at Goumbook. I've had the honor of seeing the MENAT Regenerative Agriculture Initiative flourish in the last couple of years, which we conceptualized with the help of HSBC, and it's great to have so many of our partners in the room, our judges, Yasmin and David and Lucy and everyone else that Tatiana has already acknowledged here. What we're trying to do with the program, the MENAT Regenerative Agriculture Initiative, is really rally a regionally relevant movement around regenerative agriculture and the important role that it plays, not only in the food systems, but with its connection to climate change and issues such as water scarcity and combating desertification. And we're trying to do this on the basis of trying to support research, science, and nature-based solutions, and rallying the ecosystem and an enabling ecosystem to help them thrive to answer a lot of our challenges in our region.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yazen Al-Kudmani. I manage the UAE's largest organic farm, Emirates Biofarm, and agritourism project, as well as representing a diverse group in agriculture where we work in fertilizers, technology, infrastructure, and we formed a consultancy to support on technical matters on food policy, and we work very closely with His Excellency Dr. Sheikh Majid Qasmi. on the technical side of agriculture in the UAE. I'm a senior consultant for the World Economic Forum on something called Food Innovation Hub UAE, where we are looking at innovation ecosystems in the country and establishing kind of an innovator's journey throughout the UAE's ecosystem by providing access to the different programs and collaborating to establish a cohesive hub in the country.
Thank you so much. So the title of today's session is Our Land, Our Future, and it was basically the slogan of COP16 in Riyadh. The reason why we decided to use the same title was to, on one hand, follow up on what was discussed. I don't know if all of you had the opportunity to attend COP, but it was an incredible event, the first time for this COP to actually be in the Middle East, in an arid region, and a lot was discussed, a lot of challenges, but also a lot of solutions. So my first question would be to Dr. Majid on helping us also better understand the importance of this COP, what was discussed, and what were the outcomes.
So with COP16, we were looking at the challenge when we were discussing regenerative agriculture. You have to understand that the history of this region has had, a lush green zone. It's everybody looks at this part of the world as the sort of dry, very difficult environment. But we actually, in our ancestry, in our history, had a lot of green and lush environment here. And what we've seen at COP16 is a lot of discussion about how we can rehabilitate that. How can we bring it back? And under the support of Saudi Arabia with their green initiative and their replanting, the region has taken a stance, whether it's Saudi or even the UAE, that we're determined to bring that period of our history back into today. And we're going to have to do a lot of different things. But they've got a couple key, call it foundational pillars that we can rely on. One, long-termism, right? Leadership here are looking well beyond their own generation. We have the capital, and there's massive funds going into this activity. The research in academia, so the learnings of what the call it the needed information to make it effective is there. But what's missing ultimately is a way to create an ecosystem through policy for everybody to take part, rather than to have this sort of cascade down as, oh, we have one initiative and they're giving that out. Now, on the global stage, because this was a COP, we have many different experiences coming to the table. We were there in the blue zone, and a lot of policymakers, legislators are talking about how do they bring essentially their work into dealing with desertification, right? The challenge has been for the longest time for the COP of desertification, which was known as the poor COP, because it dealt with certain countries that were developing, challenged in their own environments, and it wasn't a global issue. Now, the irony is it's becoming everybody's issue. Everybody looks to this part of the world to say, well, we're suffering now with water issues, we're suffering with soils depleting, we're suffering with agricultural places becoming barren. And lo and behold, this is the part of the world that's innovating, that is trying to solve in that sort of environmental sort of lab, and taking those learnings and taking them out into the world is what's going to be the next chapter for this whole agenda on desertification. And regenerative agriculture kept coming up as the way to do that, because you hit two birds with one stone. You rehabilitate soils, you make fertile land, but also there's an offtake of food that is needed for this growing population on Earth. So if we can get regenerative agriculture, which again is that sort of key solution dealing with agricultural challenges, the desertification, and supporting life and job creation, technologies, etc. What was really cool about COP16 is we got the one time for all of that to be in one place. And like COP28 that we had here in the UAE, everybody was so imbued with an energy that they could all bump into, speak with, discuss, and plan with every facet of what we need to make it happen. COP16 was really good in that it was a lot more focused on the issue and challenge of desertification. The takeaways really, and this is the sort of challenge that we all deal with in the food system, is there are so many problems to tackle. And it's so good to see such a diverse room, because ultimately having everybody here from the investment side, from the business, from the practitioners, it's going to take all of us. And that nobody's going to solve this alone, and we have to come together. Ultimately, it's about what part of that puzzle can you tackle, and how can you get with your co-operators in that space, whether it's the financiers to come together, whether it's the operators to come together, and figure out how you can do it together. The problem is, if everybody's doing their own thing, we're all going to be in our own little sandbox, and then we'll all be here year after year at COP after COP talking about what needs to happen. One thing that came away from COP28 that was continued in COP16 was really action. We have to come down on action, impact. And I've been speaking to a number of different areas and sort of government authorities that are saying, okay, we're done with all the diagnostics, we're done with all the research. Academia keeps doing its thing, we keep figuring these things out, we know we have a problem. Why are we not trying more? Why are we not, going into the ecosystem and looking for impact, delivering, and trying? And I think that's the point we should be looking on. Why are we not acting? Is it a fear for failure or whatever? So with that grand speech, the idea here is that action is really what needs to happen, and that's what came away from COP16, right? Desertification needs immediate action. It's a long-term challenge, but more and more regen agriculture is coming to the fore as being the solution to that.
Thank you, Majid. And as you say, when we met at COP, you also supported the UAE pavilion with the curation of the different events. It was impossible to actually meet because there was so much happening into the action zone after the talks. Everyone would meet to actually discuss what could be done. And this was incredible to witness. So thank you for that. I think, I'm sorry to, I interrupted you, but when you were saying we need to take action, what are we doing? This is where I wanted to say, well, we are doing, and I think all of us are trying, as you mentioned, in silo, unfortunately, most of the time. But I would like Sam to help us also understand regenerative agriculture in the Middle East, in the MENA region. What does it mean? Because I'm sure at COP we had the regenerative agriculture topic coming through, but what does it mean for the region?
I think I'd like to also highlight that not everybody is completely aware that we actually have 3 types of COPs. We have the Conference of Parties, and they're called the Rio Convention, or the Rio Trio, if you want. So COP28 that happened in Dubai and in Baku 29 are the COP of climate. Got the COP of biodiversity that also took place this year, earlier this year. And you've got the COP of combating desertification, which is what took place, the UNCCD, which took place in COP16 in Riyadh. And I think looking at all these 3, and this was a unique year because all 3 of them, a very busy year for the UN and civil society because they all took place in the same year. But what's beautiful to look at this within the context of regenerative is that regenerative agriculture is really at the heart of being able to combat and the solution to the action that Dr. Majid was saying to all 3. It helps combating desertification, land degradation. With that comes water. It helps climate change through the carbon sequestration of soil, and it helps with biodiversity. And on top of that, it's a nature-based solution, which is really a powerful tool to have. It's if we worked with nature, we could solve our own challenges. So it's a lot easier and inspiring a topic to really understand and drive deeper. And this is why we wanted to develop a regionally relevant regenerative agriculture, because from an awareness perspective and also from the action, it allows us to have this overall encompassing umbrella that allows us to drive the awareness and the linkage between climate change and food, which, to be honest, not everybody was very aware of. We thought of hunger, SDG 2 with food and food security perhaps, but COP28 really did a fantastic job at really solidifying, led by the team here in the UAE, at solidifying that linkage between food and climate change and the role that soil can play. And with everything, it needs to be regionally relevant. And the COP of desertification just added that regional relevance. And it was the first time that regenerative agriculture was on the agenda as part of, and ironically enough, it was the first time that the UNCCD of COP16 of combating desertification came to our region. So it was wonderful that all these different components fused and allowed regenerative agriculture to be as what we can do in terms of action. We are doing a lot in terms of action, and I think I'll leave that for when we go into the program, or would you like me to go through it?
You lead.
So I think definitely we need to lead with action, and you know, Yazan will talk more about how he's leading with action perhaps on the farm, and where we saw a very unique opportunity was to assess the landscape of how to come up with solutions. So at Goumbook, we're the eyes and ears on the ground, and then we're quite good at seeing opportunities and challenges because we put impact, social and environmental impact first. We start seeing things emerge or areas where we need to rally and develop programs around it. And this is how the Regenerative Agriculture Initiative came out. So we were hearing about food security and food systems, yet we were hearing about very high-tech, high-investment solutions and the big headlines, 200 million in climate indoor controlled environment agriculture. So like, you know, let's map out what is out there. And we realized that there was a clear opportunity to have accessible solutions. 60 to 80% of farmers are still small to medium farm holders in the region. Having accessible, the right tech, not necessarily the low tech, but the right tech. The other insight that we had is that researchers in our region were not getting the support that they needed. A lot of their breakthroughs were ending up in a beautiful library in the drawer of a professor, and the professors were saying, these are years of breakthroughs that aren't seeing the light of day. So a lot was happening in the entrepreneurial space. Most of the programs and support was there, and we realized that with David and the HSBC team, we conceptualized it and said, we need to drive regenerative agriculture because it brings all the different component and food systems together. But we also need to focus on researchers because their groundbreaking scientific breakthroughs are not coming forward, but we also need to do capacity building and upskilling to allow them a spot and to support them in the way that we have in the last 20, 30 years for startups. To replicate the model of ecosystem support and enabling environment for startups, specifically for research and scientists in this field.
Thank you, Sam. And something I want to bring up, because the next question, of course, is for you, Yazan, as a practitioner, as a farmer. You're a bit of an exception. When we talk about farmers in the region, the average age of a farmer is around 55, 56 years old. And none of these farmers is telling his children to actually be a farmer. And the big question is, who is going to be the next generation? Who is going to produce our food? How can we enable future generations to feel that to be a farmer is cool? So here we have a very cool farmer. Someone who really, I mean, Yazan, you've been leading in this. You are an inspiration for everyone. You've been fighting and you continue to fight to demonstrate that agriculture is possible, organic agriculture is possible, and now you're moving into even regen and tourism. We would love to hear from you what are the challenges that you face today, and also if there is anything related to policy and regulation that has stopped you or that could enable you or changes that are happening today in the ecosystem.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think there was a lot of very valuable information shared. There's a lot to talk about. But I think for the interest of the people in the room who are interested in investments and financial returns while doing good, hopefully, right? So why are we talking about regen? From my point of view, our group also works and represents some of the high-tech solutions globally. What we are seeing is scale. So with regen, it's something that can cover a lot of aspects of agriculture. Meanwhile, right now, a lot of the high-tech indoor is limited to the types of crops that can grow. So we see, lettuce, high-value leafies and berries. But we need a multi-pronged approach. So when we look and say we need to save water in the agriculture space in the UAE, where do we use our water is very important as much as we need to save water. We use our water in date palms, animal feed, or vegetable crops. So if we add strawberry farms to that, did we save water? Even if the strawberry farm saves water. This is not against these projects. These are very important projects, but that is why we need this multi-pronged approach to target all of the other elements of agriculture and look at crops that contribute to food security. So for us, we believe regenerative, we do organic agriculture, which regenerative is a huge part of. And with that, why is the global community very interested in it? On a financial level, first of all, scale. Second is the carbon capture potential. So our lands are a huge contributor to capturing CO2, same as the ocean. And there's a big opportunity through agriculture to create this mass change. So that is where a lot of the investments, we see huge multinationals talking about this, integrating it into their programs. So there's an opportunity for innovators there. We see also another opportunity that is very relevant for the UAE, and it's more like the biomimicry. So to regenerate nature, a lot of times we look at how does nature generate, what is the natural composters, what is the natural waste management, if you may. So there's insects, microorganisms, yeasts, and so on. So now you see a lot of innovators also working in the waste management sector, and that targets multiple things. So you have diversion from landfill going back into agriculture, whether it's mushroom compost, or it's going to become animal feed, or it's going to become high-value inputs and fertilizers. So that is very important and important sectors that should be targeted, and you can really see the potential for return on investment in those spaces. And in terms of production, also, you're going to contribute by providing animal feed that is local. You're going to be able to improve food security locally and enhance food production. Now, when it comes to policy and regulation, this is a lot to unpack. Obviously, any innovator, and we see this in a lot of cases, so sometimes they come to us as Emirates Biofarm. I want to do a new type of mushroom that grows on palm date waste, for example. I want to do insects, but regulation is difficult. Moving waste across Emirate lines is controlled. And then getting into an incubator where you get funding and you sit in an office sometimes does not help somebody who's in the agriculture sector, which is capex heavy, needs land, water, electricity, licensing, and so on. So we're trying to solve that by providing an access program. And the idea with the access program is to support these innovators who come through pipelines like the Regen Agriculture Program to go into the existing ecosystem of the UAE. So there are already large investments, whether it's with ADQ and Silal, whether it's an Emirates Biofarm or an International Center for Biosaline Agriculture or a vertical farm. A lot of them could provide the access to the facility to do pilots and trials and proof of concepts that will help these innovators. Because the examples I gave you are good friends, whether it's the insects or the mushrooms, and it took them 2 years and 3 years, and each one now rents an entire farm where they use a corner of it, 5%, to just get the ball rolling and to do a pilot project. So I believe having access, there's some projects in terms of sandboxes to help with policy. So when you talk about fermentation, insects, whatever it is, now people are trying to do policy sandboxes, whether in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, to help with the policy and regulation. Yeah, but there's a lot to discuss there.
Thank you, Yazan. Dr. Majid, you've been working as a former advisor to the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. You've been working and on policy, you've seen a huge change and evolution in the interest on food security and the steps taken. I mean, from the times where Her Excellency Mariam Al-Mahari was Ministry of State for Food Security. Can you tell us what has happened in these years and where we are at today that actually enables the ecosystem?
So when the whole conversation around food security started, I was doing that work with the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, and it was a way to recognize that we have to put that subject front and foremost. And we'd had a traditional structure of dealing with sort of plant-based agriculture, livestock, food safety, and most governments structure it that way. But with the UAE's situation, or any country in this region, we're typically dealing with stability issues. We've had a couple black swans where suddenly everybody has to stay home, and call it, you know, my intuition or just understanding that being prepared is better than trying to solve the problem. When we started thinking about this, we started looking at political relationships, because no country is an island that sort of runs its own food system and feeds itself. Even the biggest agricultural states are importing food into their own space. It's about how much you're dealing between trade and your local production. Now, the work of food security comes high on the agenda, and suddenly there's this sort of self-reflection. How good do we have our agriculture system on the ground here? And what happened was there was suddenly a flurry of getting agricultural activity up front on the agenda. The leadership all wanted to see what were we doing and how could we do better. I mean, just to look at how many dairies have set up in the last 5 years, when we had the one or the two, Marmoum and Al Ain, and the few small setups, and suddenly there's quotas being developed from abroad. We have 2-3 dairies, Maleha now, a 2-dairy milk in Sharjah. That agenda is calling back on the origin of this country when we set up, because it's how the late Sheikh Zayed built our country. It was on agriculture, and the quote is quoted till everybody's memorized it. But the premise here is food is how we grew the country, right? Oil and gas was the fuel by which we could pay and develop this. But as soon as the water isn't available or the food isn't available, we are in a crisis. Now, on the policy side, what happened was technology started coming in. Everybody's ideas started coming in. And at the ministry, you're getting bombarded with, and Yazan knows this very well because they turn up at his farm and I've got a new technology, I've got a solution, I've got the sliced bread that's going to make it all okay. But your regulation, the cycle by which you develop rules to make sure that the public is safe, to make sure that the industry is safe. Again, importing technology is great, but everybody wants to import products as well. And suddenly there's this friction between, hey, we want to innovate, and we also want to make sure we can, you know, safeguard the public health, safeguard. Today, we're talking about precision fermentation, novel proteins. And the way I say it now as an advisory, a lot of startups and tech come to us and they go, oh, I've got this new thing. And I'm typically having to say to them, okay, well, you're the third in line this year. I've seen your colleague from the US who's got the similar product and somebody from Japan who's got that as well. And the idea is we're in a big market. You know, the UAE has always been a trading hub, and now it's heightened with all of this. So all of this influx and regulation has to try and keep up. And the challenge is there. These regulators, how do they understand what is and isn't working? How do they qualify what can and cannot operate? And this is where the sandboxes are super interesting. But you need some sort of patron that will allow a testing space. You need a trial. In the last few years, the sort of central government, the Prime Minister's office, a lot of initiatives have created these bubbles by which we can innovate. And so you have startup ecosystems, you have innovation spaces, you have the sandboxes. And we've had some rollout into proper regulation, like there's now an activity and a license for a smart farm, right, or a sustainable farm. The challenge is when you move so fast, what is it? Move fast and break things. The idea is sometimes something will work and something won't work. And I think that's where the tension is. Any country that wants to be an innovator has to be okay with some things breaking. And we're very fortunate that the UAE is very tech forward, very forward looking. We built this country in such a short space of time. We were talking with some friends a good few days ago, and they were like, oh, I was with a local friend down at the Shindara, and they were telling me, how it looked like in the 70s. I was like, oh, that's an easy way. I can do the same tour. There was nothing here, there was nothing here, there was nothing here. And now we've got high rises and development. And this is happening in the food system as well. And I think the public doesn't see it because food is always some further away from our day-to-day. As a regulator, it is an extreme challenge to be well-read and understand what one technology versus another means, and ultimately how global regulation is being done and the lack thereof, and how we can give it a safe journey so we can innovate without breaking too many things. And today, I think we're doing well. I think a lot of collaborative work between different aspects, economic, political, scientific, etc., need to come together. It's why I stepped out into the private sector. I honestly felt like I was being held back if I were to follow, regulation pace. And I felt like we needed an actor that could mediate between private and public so that we could translate innovator and startup speak to the regulator and the legislator. And that's typically where the friction is. I've experienced it many times in the ministry where somebody's talking and I'm like, I get it. And then my team is like, yeah, but we can't do that. Of course we can't do that, but let's figure out how and where the opportunities lie. And maybe if we create a space. I was not too long ago doing a facilitation here for the healthcare sandbox, right? And because the global reputation of the UAE is we're thinking forward, we're thinking future, everybody else is turning up. And I think the important thing is, how do we get government and private to work well together so we can continue to usher that innovation in the right direction? No government officials in the room here. So the idea is, how do we take this group and interface them with the government? And the Capital Club has been really good at facilitating that recently, and very happy that I'm on the government committee as well. But for the food, Yezen and I, we spend many, many nights, and Samantha and Tatiana know it as well. It's time. You need time in the offices. You need to build trust. So anybody here who's looking to do that, the old trope is still the same. You need to spend time in the Majlis. You need to spend time with the government. You need to build trust. And then you can have the honest conversations about where you go. It's always been that when I was in the government, and it's still true today.
Thank you. I think you mentioned very important things. The first one is that we have solutions coming to the UAE from all over the world. And this has been, I would say, the tradition in all sectors. It's food, it's construction, it's technology, it's building materials. And I think what we realize is that for governments, but also for private investors, what is difficult is when you have a solution that worked in Japan, in Europe, in the US, and you never know if it's going to work here. In our small world of just tree planting, trying to not use too much water, we would use technologies that work very well in the US, boxes that you put on the ground that hold water for 30 days and you don't need to water. They would not work here because the box with the salinity of the soil would break down in 2 weeks. Wow. Very small examples. And I think another thing you mentioned is science. You need a lot of research behind every single solution. So for an investor and for a government, the first question is, how do I know this is working here? Where is the data? And this is where I would like to bring in Samantha, because the Regenerative Agriculture Program, venture program actually, is an accelerator that brings together all the scientists of the region. So not from all over the world, from the region, having the knowledge and the data. So what are the solutions that you've seen coming through from the countries? We'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so the initiative is a broader umbrella. And I think this is the first accelerator that we've done at Goumbook. And the reason we did an accelerator is just as a modality to try and assess different solutions out there, uncover them, to figure out how to support them. It was very important for us to make sure that This was led as a regional initiative. It was for the region, by the region, to tackle our challenges. And I think when we started, there was a lot of skeptical questions about how much research is there in this region, how much food systems innovations is it from there? Isn't it easier to just go out and bring it from abroad? And I think, you know, it's a query that we had also. We wanted to go out and see what was out there. And it was amazing after we are now in our second year of the program. So even after the first year, we just announced the top 20 of this solution. So we received about over 660 registrations of interest. And we received them from over 65 countries. The shortlisted, over the last 2 cohorts of the program, the shortlisted solutions tended to be from this region, but even the ones that came from, say, Bulgaria, had a perspective on salinity, which was an interesting perspective. But we were staying true to the program to make sure that it was regionally focused innovations that we were allowing a place in the program. Now, entrepreneurs are great at pitching, and they'll come and the deck will be amazing, and they're serial entrepreneurs, and they will wow you just through their skills and communication skills. Whether it works or not is something that you trust them, but yet we're still willing to invest in them and take a chance. The flip side of the equation is that researchers have solutions and the data does the talking. It's incontestable. Like, it either works or it's not. The data is proven. Yet they don't have the necessary skill sets to wow you with these presentations. They will drill you with technical details, and the most smartest person in the room will be like, I'm smart and I know what they said was smart, but I don't understand any of it, you know? And pitching skills is really not their forte. So it's really about, and private sector will question the return on investment and the length of ROI to invest in them. This is the opposing world that we were living in. It's like a dedicated expert that's dedicated decades of expertise in a lab on a specific challenge and has become an expert. Yet we'd rather wing and hedge our investment than somebody that is just really great at wowing us with decks and presentations. And this is really what we were trying to bridge in that gap, is giving researchers an even playing field to be able to compete with investment and to be able to come forward as a solution. And I think Sheikh Majid mentioned something that was very interesting, which is that translation aspect. A lot of the boot camps and the sessions that we take them on, the top solutions, is ideation with our partners, is how do you ideate effectively? You can talk for an hour about your research. It's not going to resonate to the crowd. It's all about the relevance and the connection, and really walking them through the ideation about thinking about the market. What is the challenge you're trying? These are, I mean, you're all come from a business background, so these are basics for you, but someone in research, this is like a new world to them, and just being able to bridge those was very interesting. And it's about the accelerator. You know, you often hear about, okay, we've got our top 3 winners, here's a checkbook, okay, good luck, and that's it. And for us, this is the beginning of the journey. We've got 2 cohorts of pipeline that have come forward. We've got a huge variety of solutions. I mean, on top of mind, we've got nano encapsulations of wheat, and we've become professionals in these terminologies. I say we need an honorary PhD. The team here going through all these solutions need an honorary degree, and David, we walked David through these solutions, so he's also become an expert in all the terminology. We've seen a lot of circularity in terms of biofertilizers, but you know, and the cutting edge, a biofertilizer, organic waste, or vermicompost, to us might sound simple until you understand that the nuances in the type of bacteria as a breakthrough that's being used. We've got RNA with red palm weevil that's coming forward, a bit controversial, but you know, we'll leave that to the judges to assess. Very relevant for our region. And a lot of them are coming forward in terms of combating desertification, putting soil at the forefront of everything we do, crop resilience. And you can see all of, if you visit our website, MENAT Regenerative Agriculture, there are the top 20 solutions. And if you're interested in any of them, please reach out. But I think what's interesting to note is that regenerative agriculture is not a new concept. It's a new term. It's about working with nature and putting the soil at the forefront. And I think this is important to note. And what was interesting is these PhD agriculture experts, surprisingly, were not as knowledgeable as we'd hoped that they would be in sustainable practices in agriculture and regenerative practice, which is a net positive perspective of looking at things. So a lot of this, we went into capacity build and provide them with an even playing field to bring these solutions to the forefront as viable solutions to connect private, public, and civil society and the whole ecosystem. But what was very evident within the first couple of sessions that we needed to infuse regenerative, sustainable food systems as modules also. And we just completed bootcamp 1. And also financial literacy, the macro perspective of, okay, you've got a great solution, what are the different aspects of that? But also financial literacy, which is really taking them out of their comfort zone. I just want to end also saying regenerative as a concept is not only in agriculture. We're hearing it a lot in agriculture. But, you know, we've got regenerative banking, you've got regenerative architecture, and there's a famous drawdown organization who basically mapped out every single sector and how to tackle climate change and published a book, and it's a blueprint, and it's up to us to now adopt that in action. Had then done the same thing with regeneration across every single sector. And I think we're seeing the evolution of starting, you know, and Tatiana and I have talked about this quite a bit, you know, we started talking with philanthropy and CSR, seeing the evolution of sustainability coming through as a net zero concept, and regeneration, be it agriculture or in any other industry or context, takes that concept and just takes us one notch higher. It's not just about minimizing the risk and damage as net zero, it's a net positive. And I think it's important that we're talking here about regenerative agriculture, but regeneration and how it can be applied to all the different sectors that we're here representing is an important takeout.
Thank you, Samantha. I think something I would like to highlight is that, for example, the winners of the first regenerative program were 3 women, so that was already a great win. 1 researcher from Saudi, 1 from Egypt, and 1 from the UAE. What we realized is that now what do we do with these winners? Who are the players in the region who are going to be interested in these solutions? We know their work, they are ready to pitch. Who are we going to pitch to? Who is ready to actually give an opportunity for proof of concept? Because yes, it works in Saudi. Is it going to work in Egypt? Or the Egyptian solution, is it going to work in the climate condition of the UAE? This is a gap in the market that is very, very big. The second one is investing in this early stage. And maybe also, Yasin, you can tell us more about this financial or investment ecosystem here. From the little I know, it looks always about big numbers. What can these new solutions do? Where do they go? Where can they find support? Do you have an ecosystem for them? What can we do? I mean, sandboxes, yes, but how do I access those sandboxes, and how many can access those sandboxes?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of people here might have a bit more information, Majid, as well. But I believe some of the top ones are, for example, Hub 71, which is ADQ's arm for early stage investments and support. It does an incubation function, it does an investment function with its partners, Abu Dhabi Investment Office and ADQ and so on. And then you have Masdar, so this is Abu Dhabi side. In Sharjah, you have the Sharjah Research and Technology Innovation Park, who also has their own pipeline and investments. In Dubai, you have MB Mohammed bin Rashid Innovation Fund as well. But again, these are all broad. In terms of purely agriculture, I think the Regenerative Agriculture Program is a pipeline that could basically be a place where investors look at to support them. In terms of the innovators themselves, this is why I was talking about the access program. So part of it is to provide them access to these ecosystems. We are in the IFC, who has an innovation fund as well. So to try and introduce them to this ecosystem is a function that we're trying to develop more at the hub. Yeah.
This is under the World Economic Forum.
This is under MBRGI, which is Mohammed bin Rashid Global Initiatives, and the World Economic Forum, which established the Food Innovation Hub UAE. So we're trying to be a hub to bring together all the, you mentioned the siloed nature of a lot of these efforts. So we're trying to look at where the gaps exist, where we can support and bring together. We have really good private sector representation on our leadership committee, which is Al-Tahra, one of the world's leading animal feed producers and agriculture production in general globally. IFCO, which is the largest, one of the largest food processors in the world, and it's based in the UAE. You have also Abu Dhabi National Hotels, which does 11 million meals a month. And you have Majid Al Futain, which operates up to 400 supermarkets in, I think, 11 countries. So, you know, we have a really robust leadership committee. We have MBRGI and the World Economic Forum and the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment on top. And then we are trying to support through these initiatives and partnerships where we are providing a sourcing function to source innovators, access programs to allow them to access some of these ecosystems, and then in the end to scale, to find success through introducing them to investment opportunities and trying to work on the policy and regulation to make sure that they find success. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to say one small, you know, I made a post recently, and it's kind of targeting this objective. And the core of the post is there's no guarantee that you will be able to sell your product if you grow locally. So a lot of assumption is we import 80% of food. Immediately, people go into solutions that produce more food. But the people producing food are struggling to sell it.
Yeah.
So we compete on a global market that's open for trade. We compete on cost with countries that it's not about tech or efficiency sometimes. It's about trade regulation, quotas, protectionism. So Europe's agriculture industry is, you know, filled with protectionism and quotas, and that's how it's robust. And subsidies, it's the same across even animal feed. Sometimes it's cheaper to import it from the US than even closer nations, and because of subsidy structure. So you can't beat that with innovation sometimes. So, and then we have a globalized population. So you have people from 180 plus countries. Doesn't matter how much tomato I produce, sometimes the retailer is going to give you a choice. This is how much local tomatoes, then you need Spain, and you need Netherlands, and you need Lebanon, and doesn't matter if I produce more, they're not going to give me more shelf space. So we are trying, and this goes into food sovereignty as well. We're never going to have food sovereignty if we chase what the global population and trends are in terms of the food products. So can Dubai chocolate be made of camel milk and Dubai dates exclusively? So that you drive demand. This is how other countries do it. We didn't suddenly all wake up and decide to have avocados for breakfast. Yeah. This is a global industry lobbying effort that put acai on all our menus. You're having oat milk in gas stations at this point. And at a time when we come and say, hey, let's have camel milk, well, you know, local dairies 4 dirhams a liter, camel is 8, it's too expensive, I can't have it. Oh, now you have coconut milk, almond milk, oat milk, and it's all 11 dirhams, 12. Sea bass is not the cheapest fish. Salmon is not the cheapest fish. So don't tell me about my local fish being expensive. If there's no demand, they're not going to put it. So we want to drive demand using the global position of Dubai and Abu Dhabi as global cities to influence now menus through chefs, through different programs, through hopefully a sourcing calendar, an annual one, to show what is the seasonality of UAE, what are the products locally, what are the sustainable ingredients, how you as a chef can source them, to drive that demand so that when you set up an agriculture project in the UAE, it finds success. Right now, it's difficult to compete with every single farmer on the global stage with completely different trade structures.
Samantha, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the sandbox and give a bit of a regional perspective, because I think the challenges and the discussions on food and climate change and the topics at hand need to be tackled at a regional perspective. This is why we've done it. They don't stop at our borders. We just joined the Saudi Agri-Food Tech Alliance as members within the MENAT Regenerative Agriculture Initiative. And the ministry, this is an alliance of different food systems players led by the Ministry of Environment, Water and Agriculture of Saudi Arabia. And they just launched last week. We were in a session where they had the sandbox regulations framework that they just launched. So I think there's a lot happening. Yesterday we were, actually a few hours ago, I was in Cairo. just flew in from a United Nations Food Agriculture Organizations, and we had a co-creation workshop across 2 days in Cairo, trying to establish an innovation, a research-based innovation hub, specifically within food systems, but specifically focused on food safety. So there are these regional initiatives that are important to also address, and the UAE is doing a fantastic job, but there's a lot going on, and that competition between all of them is a bit great. Match that with government regulation, with the sandbox regulation, I think things are brewing, and we're going in the right direction. The regulators and the government's understanding that if they want innovation to tackle a lot of these changes, sometimes the innovators move faster than the regulations and suddenly hit a wall. Specifically in RNA technology, you can imagine, or encapsulation, or all of the even mycelium at one point in time was facing regulations, which is quite simple in terms of regulations, and also alternative protein, etc. So I think the regulators are waking up and saying, we've pushed and pushed innovators, and now the innovators have taken action and woken up to the call, and it's like, oh, we've got to catch up with them and help open the door and place the rails for them to keep going. And I think the private sector really needs to understand that innovation is not, as I mentioned before, isn't just about these serial entrepreneurs. It's really working to translate the research, because you may have to be a bit more patient in terms of time, but that is where the biggest breakthrough that comes through. A lot of the innovation pipeline that have come through are patent protected, IP protected. And you can imagine what a competitive advantage a license agreement with them, or whatever agreement. And also, it's important to understand for the private sector that it's not necessarily about the private sector getting the right deal out of this equation. These innovations are so important from an environmental and social impact perspective. And it's about meeting halfway. It's a win-win situation. Otherwise, private sector has a responsibility where they can actually drown these scientists and innovations before they've even had the opportunity to service us. And they are servicing us within this field in terms of innovation. And also calling on private sector to think a bit more creatively about how can we finance and support. A typical VC approach is probably really going to drown these types of innovations. And we tell our startups, and they're not really startups, they're innovators in research and science and nature-based solutions, like, it's okay if you're not a good fit for the VC. That is fine. It's not a failure, because we think Shark Tank and the VCs and equity and negotiation for stake as like giving away stake in your IP and patent may not be the right thing for you. And the truth is that we're looking at more of a blended finance. And so it's got, yesterday actually, the team just finalized one of the bootcamp sessions, which was introducing what private investment is, what public investment options are available to them. And then this like new age, I call it new age. I don't know if the team here will agree with that terminology, but regenerative agriculture practices opens new mechanisms of funding. And our friends at CECOM, which are friends of quite a few of us here, are an amazing case study about how when you work with farmers and transition them to biodynamic, or another term for regenerative agriculture, and there are many terms out there, that it opens up the doors for carbon offset programs, so adopting renewable energy and sustainable practices. But it also opens the door for financing through soil carbon sequestration, which Yasmin was mentioning earlier. So measuring how much how much carbon the soil has been able to naturally absorb through healthier soil. Obviously, that will be incremental. And then with an auditing setup, and the third party being able to provide carbon farming credits. And now the newest mechanisms that we're looking is biodiversity credits. So we've got some of our partners on our previous advisor, Neil Spackman, has worked in Mexico on biodiversity, and regenerative agriculture is opening up the ways. And this is exciting to think. By adopting a farming practice, it opens up a financing mechanism that wouldn't otherwise have been available for traditional agriculture. So I think it's not just about doing the right thing and the environmental and social aspect, but it completes the whole ESG spectrum with providing with a financing mechanism. And the truth of the matter is that these solutions are very impact driven, and they're going to fall within a blended mechanism. And here we call on private sector to be open to match the grant or to match the carbon farming and to find new ways. And I think we've got better experts than me in finance in the room, and perhaps we can talk about those type of mechanisms. But private sector needs to look at these from more of a purpose-driven investment and almost philanthropic, but also it's got to be a win-win for everybody at stake to move the needle in this type of innovation.
Thank you, Sam. I know you have to go.
No, I wanted to make a comment.
Okay.
I was getting worked up here. On Samantha's comment just now, I realize something that I'm frustrated with, and I think Yazan as well, is that we're in this moment where it's regen ag's turn, right? There's a hype cycle building. Everybody's using the words, right? Are we gonna, we've got AI, I really, really hope we don't do to regen agriculture what we've been doing with every other hype. I'm already getting the heads up that there's some Q&A, I think, in the back. Super. I think I'm at odds with the idea of it being philanthropic. And I think we're preaching to the choir if we think everybody's going to invest in regen ag because it is the right thing to do. Of course it's the right thing to do. I want to get that out the way. What we do need to speak about is that it is also a successful investment. And Yazan and I have talked about other industries and sectors where there have been failures, and with that technology hype cycle, that there's disillusionment and there are challenges with, what was it, closed system ag. Well, the joke is it's always been around, and in fact, the Dutch have been doing for a long time, and Yazan's company's been providing. There are a lot of people who come and say, no, but mine is different. Let's not get drawn up in the naming and the calling it out. Let's look at really delivering investment and returns that work. And we have in the region the possibility to make the best sort of case studies that will be referenced in the future for what regen ag does. And I'm really glad you bring up Sechem in Egypt, because that is an overnight success of 47 years or 74 years of work. That is 2 generations. Right? Helmi loves dropping that, and I think it's very poignant to say, right? Agriculture and food is not a system that works in weeks. It goes season to season, harvest to harvest. And we have to understand that with those timelines, the hype cycle may get us a lot of tension, but it won't help if everybody wants these results yesterday. So with everybody in the room, I want us to really think about how we can concentrate our efforts to get real impact and real results, so that we're not caught in this like, hey, it's this flavor of the season, and then we all go away, and then it's AI next week and whatever comes after that. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out because I realized it's
setting the tone. So
yeah.
Thank you for that. And I think I would add, in terms of soil quality, we've been told that we have maybe around 60 more harvests. Because our soils are depleting. 60 more harvests. Yeah, that's why I said around, because the number is not precise. But that means 60 years. So our soils need this attention, this input now. It's not something we can do tomorrow. Now we're going to stop talking, and we're going to open the floor to the people in the room and of course the people online. But first, I would love to hear from you. So we have some mics. If anyone wants to ask a question, please.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for this insightful conversation. There's a question that's been on my mind even since yesterday. We were at GoFood, and
sorry, could you say your name, please?
My name is Mohammed Darwish. I work with Chef Dr. Majid. we're always talking about this list of issues that we have, and we're always talking about everybody being separated and focusing on things on their own or taking on initiatives on their own. Who's supposed to be spearheading? Who are we going to look towards to, you know, carry the flag and just move forward? Is there somebody, or are we just gonna hope and keep doing our own thing?
Yeah. Can I answer that?
Let's create an alliance
Yeah.
immediately.
No, and I think this is the challenge, right? I think the dilemma, and that was the conversation yesterday, and it continues. I mean, these are like, this is the Avengers of the food system here, right? This is where we're all like, we always get together. Oh, it's good to see you. Okay, where are we at? I think the challenge is because it's so multifaceted, so because there are so many dimensions, right? People say food, people say ag. There's the whole plant side of the conversation. There's the whole animal side of the conversation. There's the underlying of water. There's the challenge of getting policy to help enabling ecosystems. People, what was the comment yesterday? All of the infrastructure, but no people to actually operate it, right? The human element. And then there's biodiversity, which is essentially, you know, the way the planet works to make sure all the natural resources are in flow. There is no one person. There will never be one person, but there are communities. And I think when we get our community aligned and we get those communities to work together, that works. I think the idea here is convening, but I'm fearful of saying convening because that's like we talk more, right? I know everybody here is doing something, right? We're all doing something in our arena. The idea, I think, is can we find those that are doing things similar and moving in the same direction so we can get that critical mass of action? Yeah, the synergies. Thank you. Yeah, and it's difficult. Everybody thinks I'm the guy. Like, they're like, go speak to Majid. And then the best I can do is make sure I can either direct them in the right place or make sure they understand where they're, you know, who's around them. Yeah, so one person, I'm fearful of that idea, but as a group, and this, I think this is a good convening because you now have the whole group talking about regen, and we can interact, and everybody can take off a challenge and piece it out and do it. Data, right? This is the biggest challenge of this region. It's why we set up Soma Mater, to solve the data question. I keep getting, oh, how many farms are there? Or who's dealing with X, Y? I've written maybe like 8 questions down that I'm like, who's invested in regen ag across the MENA region today? What does agriculture investment look like, both from an industrial and a regen ag? Like, how do we look at those numbers and make sense of that? That's what we're trying to solve for. And I hope that and then helps everybody act better, faster, more precise.
I just want to build on what you were saying before, and this is that we don't need to get fixated on the terminology of regenerative agriculture. So our partners at SICAM will call it biodynamic agriculture. We met with the Agroecology Coalition last week. It really doesn't matter. We've called it organic before. We've called it organic, regenerative, combination. It really doesn't matter as long as it puts the soil first, has a net positive, and it encompasses all of these components in environmental, social, and has a positive economic also viability, both for the rural farmers, but also for the investors. There is great success stories from a business perspective also, as Dr. Majid was mentioning. I think we shouldn't get fixated on it. And regenerative agriculture realistically we're not vouching for it as the only solution. We understand, going back to who's going to spearhead it, it's got to be all of the different solutions. You got to throw everything you have at this whole food systems climate change issue. It's not going to be the controlled environment. It's not going to be the organic alone. It's not going to be the regen alone. It's all about just vouching for a collective of different components. So there will never be one person. It's all about trying to perhaps minimize the gaps to get us, and it's such a fragmented, I mean, we were at the Global Food Security Summit a few weeks ago, and even within the UAE players, we're like, okay, we understand those of Dubai with the federal Abu Dhabi, but they're all talking the same language with the same ambition. But it's just so fragmented. Then you had, Qatar. Yesterday we heard from Qatar University what they were doing, the Saudi players, and then the regional. And I think it's about really just making sure that there is this connected ecosystem and bringing, it's smaller forums like this and then larger ones for that exchange, so that there isn't such an inefficiency in all of us trying to do things in different ways.
Consolidation,
Unsiloed.
counting purpose,
but yes, as you said, it's fragmented, and to create the scale, it needs to come together instead of not reinventing the wheel here and there. It's very local in context, but imagine how if all the people come together, how much we can accelerate the agenda and scale it.
And an open mind, I think, to different ideas and not a fixated way on doing things, not a fixed way of funding, open to new ways of funding through the soil. I mean, that is quite that needs an open mind to...
It's also awareness. There's a huge need of awareness and education at all levels. When we talk about soils, I don't know how many in the room have the data of what soils mean and what soils does. And if you know that by fixing soil alone, we fix the problem of climate change, how many know this? Is it taught in schools? No. So this is where we need this kind of information to go out there. And I feel we need to build a community. So this is an example. Ideally, any of you can approach anyone in the community to be redirected to the right person. When we started our initiative, we looked at EIT for what they were doing, because you need the experts, right? And bring that expertise and work together. The question we got is, why did you team up with a European institution? Well, because they've been doing the right thing, and they know how to do it, and they can help us to do it here. But there's a point where we need to become independent, and we need to define regenerative agriculture for the region, which is not the same definition of the US and Europe. So this is the community. And ideally, you should be able to talk to any one of us, and we will redirect you to who you need to talk to. Because as an investor, you might need to talk to a certain person, or you need policymakers. So it will never be the one. It will have to be a community. So we're here for that, and hopefully we will build it and grow it. And you'll help us spread this message.
And it's the Europe community.
Yes,
Yes.
there you go.
Yes, exactly.
That was a slam dunk.
Any other question?
That was good. Yeah.
Capitalize on what you're saying. The years of awareness where anyone, with, even if their eyes are closed, you associate water, you say life. A handful of soil has immense life of living microorganisms, which are essential to everything. You know, it's like the holy grail, and it's taken for granted. So yeah, the awareness needs to step up, and the knowledge to disseminate, to really appreciate what is in the soil. It is the brown gold of earth. So, and yeah, we need more share of voice. We need science. It's not only about general knowledge. It's really deep expertise, and how to connect the dots between the soil and the biodiversity, as you said, climate change, water conservation, animal prosperity, and even the organic fertilizers. When you were talking, also what can we do not only to produce food, but also to curb the food waste. And it all goes back as well to curbing hunger. So all the SDGs are interconnected, and it's a beautiful mission. It is, we need food and water to live. So how we can make this formula work for all of us. And it's no brainer, but it's really to continue to put it at the center stage for everyone, and to finance the journey.
Maybe also something to mention is how soils are linked to us humans. We might not care about climate change, and I hear it regularly. We might not care about diversity and nature. A lot of people don't. There's one thing we all care about is our own health. And the link of soil to our gut health is immediate. So let's think also about, you know, us, ourselves, our children. Without a healthy soil, you don't even have that kind of human health. And I think this is also something we don't talk enough about. Today, we didn't have the time, I think, to delve into the consumer side. Because here we're about what we need to do, policy, finance. Is the consumer ready to buy regenerative agricultural products? So please.
I've really enjoyed this, the setting today. I appreciate the openness with which everyone spoke. We are a local bread company. We are based in the UAE. We produce fertilizers for the last 15 years. We've got about 15 patents to ourselves. We really wanted to contribute to UAE, so we did a lot of soil profile here. We did water sampling, testing. We went for plant tissue analysis, and we found there are serious challenges. Soil per se, pH is about 8.5 to 9, very high salinity. A lot of detrimental elements in the soil. There's a lot of fixed element already. So there's over fertilization in the soil, but they're immobile because of the serious challenges of salinity. Water also, the quality is, it's hard water, which we have here. So a lot of challenges. We wanted to contribute. We have 8 scientists on board for ourselves. But unfortunately, the farmers here wants cheap quality of fertilizers because they have their own challenge of selling it in the marketplace because there is a lot of competition. So today our main markets is Brazil, US, Canada. We're supplying into Europe and also the South Asian region because we would love to contribute, but we cannot because of the challenges which are there. So we appreciate the comments, the action which Dr. mentioned about. So that's what is needed actually. So it's a holistic management. We also went to UAE University, invited the master students to come and use our facilities. But again, the interest is very limited, unfortunately. So we have called innovators from outside. We have opened ourselves as an incubator to a lot of innovators to come and use our facilities. And we've invested heavily on those. So we're not looking for funding. We're looking at partners who would love to come and use facilities and give local solutions. We came out with a solution for RPW. That was a big challenge here.
Yes,
We came out and we have taken a patent for that, and we wanted to produce it, but then MOCA had a challenge. They said you cannot produce an organic fertilizer for RPW here. So we said, okay, fine. So that is something also which has come up. So
let's have a conversation after this, please.
So there are challenges, but we hope to contribute in some way.
Thank you for what you're doing, and open to anyone who needs this kind of support. Thank you for that. Any other question? No? Yes? Have a mic.
Mic in the front, please.
Thank you very much for this very insightful discussion. One of the main challenges is always funding, and that's there's such a big gap in the SMEs. The SMEs get less than 3% funding from the banks, but the SMEs represent more than 95% of all companies in the GCC region.
And agriculture too.
Including agriculture, of course. So, so I think you mentioned there are the government funds, some of the Emirates Development Bank, Khalifa Fund, and HAB 71. But I think also for investors, the PE firms, the VC firms, how can they collaborate more with the government funds to share the risk? So there's such a big opportunity for the SMEs, the agriculture, and various SMEs and the investors. And I think it's evolving a bit, but I think there's a big gap. And the liquidity gap is so big, so I think there's a big opportunity here for the collaboration of the government funding with the private funds, private capital investors.
I'd hope the Emirates Development Bank were here to hear that comment, because we've been trying to work with them on facilitating funding, or at least we would do the analysis and feasibility along with Y3 and Yazan's team as well, where they wanted to facilitate funds to farmers to elevate into more commercial and competitive practices. The challenge is that there were so many requirements in the due diligence that they didn't even qualify for the analysis that we were supposed to do. And there, not only will that collaboration help, but I think the resourcing of all the facilities, right? And they were talking about setting up an accelerator now for farmers to get their basic business practices up to speed. I think the challenge is always, we want to be here, but actually we need to be a few steps back to get the ABCs right, to get the funding where it needs to go. The other thing is the technical, we're all here in that space. I really want Samantha's comment, because of the research, and that flow is really where it starts. But for practitioners, SMEs today, getting them funds so that they can grow, the challenge comes down to who's doing the due diligence, right? The banks do want to facilitate, but they need to de-risk those investments. and financing. The private sector does it for any sort of VCs, private equity. They all have their DD for established businesses or for the startup space. But agriculture, you need technical analysis and you need to understand the horizons of investment. Just it's not as available. I mean, we're here, but you know, how do we get that to work better?
I think what's interesting also is that so we look at it from a regional perspective, and then we're looking at it through the UAE lens. But and what's interesting is that researchers in Europe and in North America, even in Australia, have a lot of grants available to them and test plots of land. And when we did a research with the innovators that have come through the pipeline, address the support system that they needed, and their ask was quite humble. I mean, they could have asked for anything, and it was really, I just need a small plot of land, I need a bit of a lab, I need consumables in the lab, and the nominal financial aspect of it was really something nominal. Like the most we were asked for was like 20 or 30,000, maybe even 50,000. It was really something for the next step of taking them to proof of concept. Now, the other idea is that the UAE and Saudi, Kuwait and Qatar have a high GDP per capita versus other countries in the region. And these are the ones that are really pushing for innovation. The sweet, and we are not eligible for funds, regional funds, international funds, EU funds, because, and you know, we were talking to the Swiss embassy, they're like, oh, we want to do something in agriculture. Oh, you're based in the UAE. Oh no, we can't fund you. We can't be seen through our taxpayers as funding a rich, quote unquote, country. Can you tell us about projects in Egypt and in Morocco and in Lebanon and in the Levant and in general in North Africa? So it's a bit of a, we're attracting all the innovation, but we really have to drive that gap. And now that we've got all the innovation here, it's like, okay, so how do we now get the funding? One, they don't have it mapped out for them. So they don't really, it's so fragmented that they don't have a place where, you know, maybe that's something that we can collaborate all of us on and try and assess where do you go from a private and public funding and with this new funding of carbon farming, etc. Where do you go? And the other idea is how do we collaborate with regional entities to have access to these funds, and that puts even more pressure on entities here to be able to supply prizes, funded, philanthropic, private funding, whatever it might be. But those mechanisms even become more apparent in the GCC because it's a double-edged sword of being seen as the accelerators, the innovators, the funders of the region, and then that is a sector or an option of funding that is completely off limits now to innovators setting up here. So there's a lot of effort to attract startups, researchers, innovators, scientists with the different visas and golden visas that are available and the enabling environment, and then suddenly they're like, okay, but how do I fund this? And so I think that's an interesting point also as a double-edged sword to also address.
From a venture capital point of view, I think one tension across not just across investment sector here is that government entities compete from a capital with private capital. And I know many VC firms here who shy away from looking at startups here because they know that the artificial pricing by having a PIF provide capital at ridiculous valuation for a startup means that they investing into that company is more likely going to lead to a down round later, which doesn't make sense. So in a way, there's this unhealthy competition between the public capital, which is vast, and the private capital. So if you take that same philosophy and try to apply it into agriculture, it's certainly the same, but maybe there needs to be a more cooperative model where the private capital, but the public capital entities have a different relationship. They're not competing, whatever. Maybe they're providing some level of guarantee to reduce the risk for private capital, especially in agriculture, which is more foreign to the VC industry. As you said, you need technical expertise. You can understand fintech and this and that. any VC firms would have in-house knowledge of that. So I think that one way of unlocking some of that access to capital is changing the relationship between public capital and private capital, where they're not competing with each other and just saying, or even side by side, shoulder to shoulder. One needs to, public capital, I think, is more efficient from a long-term good of the country point of view to provide, to address the issues, the risk issues that private capital sees in investing into, let's say, regenerative agriculture. And I think that could, and then from the entrepreneur's point of view, if there was such a system, they would know that they can go to PIF or Mubadala or whoever, and not because they ask them for a check, but because that public entity already has the relationships with 25 private sector VCs, where they know, I'm getting, I'll just, for argument's sake, 20% capital guarantee or first loss capital or something like that. Then it becomes almost like a funnel, where instead of the entrepreneur making appointments with 80 companies, doing the pitch. Yeah, exactly. Doing the pitch, well or badly, as Samantha said. No, it becomes a lot more centralized. So I think that's one issue from the investor point of view, where it does reduce the appetite in this region for generally VC investments, and I'm sure even more so for regenerative agriculture.
We're hearing a lot the term in this space. We're hearing a lot the term blended finance, and this is capitalizing on a lot of points that you've raised. That relationship between private and public, and what role to play in the transition safety net and the risk mitigation. And I think we're going to hear a lot more about this in this space. And I don't think there's any other conference on food systems or agriculture or investments that we've gone to recently somebody hasn't brought up the whole role of blended finance, what it actually means and how it will actually materialize and what it actually looks like. I think it's still work in progress, but I think that's a concept that you've just described. It's like, how do they engage the relationship? Who does what?
Right now, it's not healthy.
Yeah. I'd like to explore that more. I've been an entrepreneur in other spaces as well, and you hope you get that government contract because that gives you a base and validates you in a market. But I've met every VC and they're like, we're not really investing in this region, there's no stability, we don't know, there's no data, and so you just get passed on. And also the VCs here are looking for unicorns, right? Everybody's trying to get the big returns, the double-digit multiplier return. If you can get PIF and that gives you legs, well, then maybe you actually have a chance. This is the first time I've heard about that competition between VC and government, and I'm surprised that that's even a way that the VCs are looking at it. I'd like to discuss that some more.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this very insightful panel. I have a question about the innovations you mentioned, as regenerative to soils, the water scarcity, etc. It's very interesting, and such as, for example, I've read that in UAE some lands and are not arable lands are reducing, so that's a very good innovation. My question is how we can have access to those innovations, because I'm trading stocks or companies every day, and many of those companies, they are not open to public capital, and at least it's very interesting to be before like those companies are growing. So at least my question is how to have access to those very interesting innovations, such as regenerating the soils, the water, etc. And do you have a plan to support those companies, at least like the agri-tech companies in the UAE? Thank you.
So essentially you're looking to say, I want a list of technologies or companies that are doing regenerative so we can get first.
Yes, we can get this and then we can invest in this, or like at least have a benchmark of that.
So, I mean, if it's startup, is there an inventory of these companies? It's literally one of the things I wrote down. Like,
well,
you guys have your regen.
Yeah, we've got. I mean, we had about 223% growth in terms of applications within year 2 and year 1.
we've got about 660 registrations across 2 years of innovation. Sorry, I can't. Innovation that have come through. We have vetted, over 200 of those, but from our perspective, our relevance to staying true to our mandate of our program. So regionally relevant, research science-based, regenerative, tackling the challenges in this region. So, and some of them may be too mature for us. I mean, we had one that was like, had a partnership with NASA for satellite imagery of agriculture. And we're like, this is not, our initiative is not for them. They've already made it. They don't need pitching skills and how to fund and the capacity building that we're offering. So if you're interested in innovation pipeline, we have quite a few. We'd have to look at it through your lens and be able to recommend a couple that might be within the field that you're looking at. But and this is something that we're also interested to do. We just need the funding partners to do that. We've got innovation coming through our initiative at Regenerative Agriculture at Goumbook. We've got an oceans-related initiative that's looking at solutions and innovations. We've got an indoor air quality initiative also tackling solution and innovation. And if anybody's interested in helping us put together like an open source repository of impact-based solutions, we've got them all. We don't want them to be stuck in our drawer either. So we just need a bit of funding and support and coordination to make that happen, but we're ready to go. And that is one of the phase 2s of when I said that this is a transformative journey that starts with identifying solutions through in the modality of an accelerator, but the real work is about how do you incubate them, how do you support them, how do you connect them, how do you give them exposure, how do you put them on a stage in front of investors, which are things that we're doing. The big one to crack is how do you manage the regulation and the partners and the technical supervision to incubate them and get their solutions to develop in terms of proof of concepts. Anybody in the room is interested? We've got the innovators. We just need the phase 2 partners to come forward. And
I think also what's worth mentioning is the way we are able to funnel down to those innovations, that the final 20, the final 10 is thanks to a pool of board members and judges that have expertise in many, many fields. So Goumbook is not the expert in regenerative agriculture. That's why we partner with EIT Food. That's why we have incredible advisors, scientists. So these solutions are vetted. When we've awarded the 3 winners, we still presented the 10 finalists because we believe they all were worthy of being exhibited. So there is a lot. And the question, we hope everyone has this question to come to us and say, show us what's available. Because honestly, they are incredible and they work. The data is there. It's just only a matter of funding and proof of concept. So if you have that in mind, come forward because it's ready for you to start and we can do it immediately. I have a question for actually, I see we have bankers and investors, and my question to you is, what would stop you today from not coming forward? Why would you not come to us, say, show me the list of innovations? What is the challenge? Yes.
I'm not a banker, I'm an entrepreneur myself, but I'm in the carbon space. So we manage one of the largest carbon credit portfolios and mainly focus on nature-based solutions. I've lived in Africa myself for 5 years, so I've done a lot with the government there. We've also been now appointed implementation partner for the government, especially for looking for alternative finances. So I come from Austria originally, and maybe what's holding back a lot of investors is the return on capital. Yeah. Because exactly as you said, doing good is nice, but what does my money do to my pocket?
Bottom line.
So in the end, and also the same is with blended finances, right? So you have to find a structure that pays the investor back. Food security, all important. Biodiversity, all important. But what in the end is the product that you are selling? And impact sells well with word by mouth, but it doesn't sell well on profits. So that's why we are looking at it from a really, let's say, capitalistic point of view to see where is the cheapest way to sequester carbon. That's why we focus a lot on Africa. So I would be very interested to see how would that work in the region with regenerative agriculture projects. And again, coming back to your point, who is spearheading that? it has to be the policy drivers. Because in the end, if the regulatory is not there, if it's based on a voluntary offset, on a voluntary market and not on a compliance market, you will never achieve the return that can be achieved if the policy is there. So to really like give the drive and the kick to all of this amazing ideas, innovation and discussions that have been happening is, I think, the policy. And one good example that we are working with is Singapore, as for example, they have been using carbon credits as their reduction tool. I know the UAE has been at the forefront to the net zero goals, but on the other hand, if HSBC is pushing back their net zero 20 years, again, these things are delaying it. So in my honest, and this is my personal opinion, it has to be the government, the regulatories and the policymakers who are spearheading this, because that is where the money will go. They will always follow this regulatory framework, because then you can be sure of your profit. And only then the impact really works also financially in a sustainable way.
From a capitalistic point of view, though, we're talking about 20, 30, maximum $50,000. When we're talking about millions of investments for other solutions, and you might lose all those hundreds of millions, why is $50,000 an issue?
No, I'm fully with you. So for me,
it's not, but it's a question.
Financing for these solutions, I think because it's not proven, and as Doctor has said, if there is no critical mass yet reached, you have to rely on philanthropic money. If there is no return on capital yet reached, no unicorn done, no XYZ done, no IPO done in that space, it's hard.
Most investors have to choose between this multiplier and that multiplier, and they want the higher multiplier. And meanwhile, and this is a factor of a factor of agriculture and regen ag not being as fast. When if you're an agnostic investor, here's your sort of graph of, or for you guys, this is your graph. If you're getting double-digit multipliers from tech, agriculture and impact isn't going to look very sexy, right? And I've spoken to people who are like, yeah, this is great. I'm like, okay, what's the X I'm getting back? And I'm like, isn't what you're playing with at the moment? They're like, yeah, sorry, we're not investing in that. But if you go to specific, and we were just sat with somebody yesterday, growth funds in ag and ag tech, it blocks away all of this stuff, and then they get into it. I'm with you absolutely on the policy thing. That's why I left, because I want to be able to help policy move faster. I couldn't do it from within, so I'm going to do it from outside. Take more of that voice and bring it to the policy developers. And it's knowledge, basically, getting them to understand.
I think this is where we can talk about ESG ranking and index and how that has been a motivator for a lot of people to come forward and not just look at profitability and capital return on investment. It's really trying to now look at this triple bottom line. And I think we're all saying the same thing. Yeah. I mean, it's got to have a return on investment. Nobody's going to do this long-term, you know, to have real impact for long-term from a philanthropic, but maybe to get started, that is a modality. But long-term, we see that this industry is not going to be run on charity by all means. It is a viable, commercially viable, and there's a lot of case studies for it, but it's also going to happily tackle also the environmental and social as well as the profitability and commercialization aspect.
You do?
I actually want to answer why not clear project.
Sorry, one second. Would you give you a mic?
I'll give you a mic. Yeah.
So I just want to answer on your question why 50,000 is a problem, because it takes same amount of time to do due diligence on those projects and invest in. I've been working on small-scale projects which were 6 million. When we go to banks, local banks, which had during COP28 announcement of investing in agriculture, not agricultural, sustainable projects, and we would pitch local project, circular with carbon part, with commercial part, with fertilization part. It didn't go through. Like, it's purely local project, it's purely sustainable. It didn't go through because it's too small. And when you ask where are money going, like all those millions, it's going to larger players because they're trusted, because there is due diligence, because there is second party opinion. When it comes to small project, to be sustainable is extremely expensive. To prove yourself to not being in greenwashing field is extremely expensive because you need to have SPO. SPO cost, start cost is $15,000. You're raising 50. How can I pay 15, right? So that's a problem. And talking about blended finance, in my personal opinion, yes, policies regulation should be, in again, purely my personal opinion. If a policy will be that 1% of all the investment for all asset management managers, all the banks, should go to the green projects regardless return, it will help. Out of all the billions of money managed here, just in UAE, 1% will help those small projects. That's one point. And second point, when we speak about technologies, it should be fintech, and fintech not for banks. Fintech, basically regenerative finance, which is blend between traditional, conventional finance world and decentralized finance. You can buy apartment here in Dubai by paying crypto. You can't invest crypto in those projects. That's a problem I see, that we are focused still on traditional finance. We still rely on banks, but to provide financing to those small projects, it should be something more innovative in terms of cash flow, which is again should be backed by blockchain and crypto innovators. However, yes, those also look at the high returns. It's just harder to manage the decentralized finance world, but still it's viable, I believe so. But it should come again together, public, private, governments, and then probably it would be just a very, very tiny step, but that's what should help, like tiny step, like it all starts from us, with choosing the local produce instead of from Netherlands import. But you have to understand, like I live here with mom. My mom babysitting my son, and she's coming to supermarket, she's opting for cheapest produce. Like it should go to the mass with a message, like what the strawberry sourced here has advantage from trees brought from America. Like it should be R&D, probably not towards consumer. Like you show on the package, like how much more vitamin C in this strawberry compared to the one which was transported from America. Carbon footprint doesn't work. It doesn't work. Trust me. I work with a lot of sustainable professionals. Carbon footprint is too vague, too vague.
Too abstract.
It should be. People don't understand. I've been teaching lots of people about carbon credit. Yeah. No one trusts it, and that's actually another pain point. The green projects I've been running, I would tell our business development team, forget word green. Yes, it has green bond mark. Positioning it as technology. Everyone wants to invest in tech. Okay, position it as a tech. There is carbon credit. Be silent about it. People are afraid to hear green. They're afraid to hear carbon credit. Though returns are there. It's typically like 10, 12% plus, which are not bad. When you buy an apartment here in Dubai, what is your return? Like 6%, most probably, after all the payment of the facilities, taxes, and so on and so forth. I believe it's all about noise. I would say bad noise about word green. And when it comes to finance, innovation should be at finance for sure. And educating consumer doesn't work. I mean, it should be a tricky way to convince them to buy local produce, which might be more expensive, might be same price, might be cheaper. But what is the trigger driver? Yes, I
we need a bit of stick and carrot, basically. A bit of policy and regulation, a bit of awareness and education for people to make their choice. I feel that we're entering a very nice set of networking and everyone wanting to share with others their thoughts. So I will thank you, our speakers, for today, for their wisdom, for their expertise, for the knowledge. Thank you very much, all of you, for being in the room and for being so long. I know we took a bit of more time. Thank you for everyone who joined online. Thank you, Capital Club, for hosting us. And I invite everyone to continue these conversations now in the networking area, and see you soon next time. Thank you. Yeah.
Should we get a picture to group photo?
Yes.